Let's take a look at the incredibly interesting personality of a scientist who lived in Italy in the middle of the 18th century. Some of his research and inventions were more than 100 years ahead of their time, and some discoveries have remained unknown to this day. Raimondo de Sangro, Prince of Sansevero, was an Italian nobleman, inventor, soldier, writer, scientist, alchemist, and mason. In the mid-18th century, Raimondo de Sangro discovered natural radioactivity at least 150 years before Curie. The researcher Clara Michinelli, in her book The Treasure of the Prince of Sansevero, Light in the Basement, Genoa, 1985, talks about a letter from Raimondo de Sangro, which underwent calligraphic examination and was recognized as authentic, dated November 14, 1763, and addressed to Baron Teatro Henry de Tschudi, his close friend. This letter contains encrypted passages written in a transliteration code. Michinelli provides the key, and here is how this passage is presented. When I met with the Supreme Brother Saint-Germain through Gabali, I showed him the discovery of the 3 crystalline substances that you know which glow in the dark. Colors, resins and oils, which I received as a gracious gift from His Majesty of Prussia, which I purified from lead, silicon, copper, and various impurities. They were subjected to concentration in a crucible through various alchemical processes. They caused the death of butterflies confined in a test tube with perforated lids. When a sheet of lead was placed between the test tubes and the substances, the butterflies did not die. The lid blocked the deadly ray and its flow. This phenomenon is similar to what is observed on the Sun. It resembles the phenomenon of an active ray. The active ray, as he called it, came from the mineral uranite, though Don Raimondo described it vaguely. These crystalline substances, glowing in the dark, resin and olive in color, this uranite had a destructive effect on the creature's fluid, as was demonstrated by experiments on butterflies. So, this is a very strange and amazing story about how an alchemist in his dark laboratory smelt something green. Then we discover it's actually the 18th century, and this is not Pierre and Maria Sklodowska-Curie at the turn of the 20th century, but Raimondo from the 18th century, about whom few people know. However, when describing the laboratories, a paradox arises. Is there enough power in an alchemical furnace to melt uranium? It is known that uranium can be obtained through enrichment, that is, by crushing the ore and extracting the valuable component from it. This means the mineral was crushed and uranium particles were extracted from it. It was mentioned in the letter that the material was concentrated in a crucible, but after that it's unclear what Raimondo did with the uranium in the crucible. Maybe he completely melted it or sintered it into something shapeless. The thing is, uranium's melting point is 1132 degrees, and uranium is melted in vacuum induction furnaces, which were only invented in the 1920s. A vacuum is needed so that impurities from the atmosphere don't get into the metal during melting. In the 18th century, such a furnace couldn't have existed. But a year after Raimondo de Sangro's letter, in 1764, Jean-Charles de Borda used a mercury pump for the first time to create a vacuum in a laboratory. If the sintering method was used, it requires approximately 630 degrees Celsius. Such a temperature can be achieved with a gas burner, which was invented in the mid-20th century. It also doesn't shield the melting process from atmospheric impurities, which Raimondo de Sangro meticulously removed with alchemical methods. What follows from the letter is that Raimondo de Sangro may have invented his own furnace, since he had an astonishing number of inventions. By the way, methods of radiation protection using lead only appeared in 1920, and no one paid attention to the experiment he devised for radiation protection. Official sources state that his death was caused by the constant use of dangerous chemicals in his experiments and inventions. By the way, such wording is very suitable for covering up an elimination by poisoning. Death from radiation exposure is unlikely, since from the letter we know that he knew how to protect himself from radiation and possibly even how to remove it from the body. A theory claims the harmful effects of uranium radiation were invented in the 20th century, and in fact the Curie's spouses did not die from it, and there is evidence for this. There is one of the most famous legends about Raimondo de Sangro, the Prince of Sansevero. According to the legend told by Benedetto, as he approached the end of his life, Raimondo de Sangro ordered himself to be cut into pieces and locked in a coffin, from which he was supposed to emerge strong and vigorous at a certain time. However, the family opened the coffin before the appointed time, and the resurrection of the reassembled body lasted a very short time, less than was needed. It is also known that a distant ancestor, the commander of Philip II Cecco, was able to sit in a sealed chest for 2 days, which allowed him to catch the enemy by surprise and defeat them, capturing the Amiens fort. And many years later, the de Sangro family did not want to wait the required time for the proper resurrection of Raimondo. Maybe it was panic or a wish to keep him from being resurrected. There are similar legends in Slavic culture involving manipulation with dead and living water. Moreover, methods of resurrection are still circulating in various publications, but they are removed from all sources by supervisory authorities. A similar method was used by Yakov Braius, a very versatile scientist of Peter the Great. According to legend, Braius ordered his servant to cut him into pieces with a sword and then pour living water over him. But this required a long period of time, and that Tsar unfortunately noticed the absence of his alchemist. The servant had to confess everything and show his master's body. They saw Braius's body was fully healed with no visible wounds. He spread his arms, breathing as if asleep with a blush on his face. Furious, the Orthodox Tsar declared, "This is not pure," and ordered the sorcerer buried for eternity. As we know, Piotr II destroyed the divine culture of the Slavs and imposed the European one, which was based on the cult of death. So, who was this Raimondo de Sangro and what else did he invent? Prince Sansevero was born in Torre Maggiore in 1710 and lived for 61 years. He is considered to be one of the first representatives of the European Enlightenment. He was a brave soldier, a writer, a publisher, the first Grand Master of Neapolitan Freemasonry. Above all, he was a prolific and enterprising inventor and patron. In the Piazza San Domenico Maggiore, the prince devoted himself to experiments in various fields of science and art, from chemistry to hydrostatics, from printing to mechanics, achieving results that seemed like real miracles to his contemporaries. However, due to his predominantly exoteric understanding of natural processes, de Sangro was always reluctant to reveal the secret details of his inventions, or rather, he did not reveal them at all. In Naples, he received his primary education and began studying literature, geography, and the arts of chivalry. At the age of 10, his talent was noticed and he went to Rome to the Jesuit college. Raimondo distinguished himself as an excellent student of philosophy and linguistics, mastered 8 languages, and studied pyrotechnics and natural sciences, hydrostatics, and military architecture. This shows that he had an absolute memory and unbreakable will, as well as the ability for self-organization. At the age of 19, he designed a stage that amazed even Nicola Michetti, the engineer of Tsar Peter the Great. In 1739, he created an innovative hydraulic device called the arquebusa, capable of firing using compressed air, in other words, an air rifle, which he presented to Karl Bourbon. He also modernized the cannon, became a colonel of the Captainate Regiment, and took part in the main battle at Velletri against the Austrians. In 1744, he founded Dimatorzok. In that year, he was recognized in Macedonia, the murder in Macedonia, the murder of Campo in Macedonia. In 1743, the murder of Campo in Macedonia. In 1743, he was recognized in the murder of Campo. In 1743, he was recognized in the murder of Campo Macedonia. In 1743, the murder in Macedonia. In 1743, he was recognized in the murder of Campo Macedonia. The book uses 40 key words from the ancient Inca recording system. The keywords of Avquipo were painted in different colors and had a circular shape. The method of color printing was unknown at that time and was invented by Raimondo himself. Apologetics touched on many dangerous topics, unorthodox theories about the origin of the world, humanity, and writing, as well as, according to Prince's opponents, esoteric messages transmitted using a secret code. The work was recognized as a hotbed of heresy and was sharply attacked in various pamphlets and was banned by the Congregation of the Index of Forbidden Books. Interestingly, even then, the censorship authorities did not have specific names, titles of organizations, or structures. They were referred to as aggregations of certain indexes. It is still believed that knotted writing cannot be read, since the rules for reading it are unclear. However, in apologetics there is not only an alphabet, but also transcription into other languages. Here are more inventions by Raimondo de Sangro. On one of the Sundays in July 1770, over the sea separating Capa Posillipo from Ponte della Maddalena, an amazing event could be seen. A carriage with many horses and a coachman was rushing across the sea waves. In reality, the horses were made of cork, and the boat, shaped like a carriage, moved thanks to a clever system of paddle wheels designed by Raimondo de Sangro. Here is an excerpt from Goti Gazzetta di Napoli from July 24, 1770. Prince Sansevero invented and built a boat in the shape of a carriage, capable of holding 12 people who, thanks to the movement of 4 wheels, can travel faster than if the boat had oars or sails. Raimondo de Sangro also obtained silk and wax from certain plants and demonstrated them to his guests and visitors at the Sansevero Palace. The wax was made without the natural help of bees and was produced from various common herbs and flowers, which were boiled in water properly prepared with many salts. At the end of this process, a kind of oil was obtained, which when collected and boiled would once again become pure wax. This white wax could be used just like beeswax. In 1752, Raimondo managed to obtain the so-called vegetable silk from a plant called Apacinuma. Because of the extreme fragility of the thread from this plant, no one had ever managed to obtain anything like it before. They had such a perfect structure that they could compete with regular silk. Using vegetable silk, Raimondo also created white paper. The interests of Prince Sansevero also extended to medicine. His ability to breathe new life into a dead body, which is commonly called resurrection from the dead, can be found in the Lettera Apologetica. In 1747, he saved Luigi Sanseverino, Prince Bisignano, from a death that seemed inevitable. The highly qualified Professor Raimondo began the difficult work using secret arts, and within a few weeks fully restored the prince's health. A similar case occurred 3 years later with a man named Filippo Garlini, whose recovery Raimondo supervised with particular care. The most renowned professors of the medical art gave brilliant recognition to this remarkable recovery. Even Minister Bernardo Tanucci, despite his dislike for Prince Desan, confirmed in a letter from 1752 that the Duke of Miranda, devastated by a deadly fever and enraged at the doctors who were unable to cure him, was healed. Raimondo de Sangro, known for reviving Bisignano, the prince was interested in pyrotechnics while still studying at the Jesuit college in Rome. Raimondo wrote in the Apologetica letter that in the future he would publish a treatise dedicated to this art in which he would describe what was unknown or hidden. However, the treatise was never published. He designed pyrotechnic theaters, creating images of temples, architectural perspectives, water displays, and houses using fireworks. And here is another piece of evidence. The amazing machine he invented for the garden creates clear and distinct bird song thanks directly to the fireworks. Fireworks were invented not for spectacular explosions, but to create a cacophony of sounds inspired by nature. The prince's ingenuity also showed in inventing many firework colors. He produced turquoise, lemon, and yellow-orange colors, white similar to the color of milk, ruby red, and many others. A particularly beautiful color was green, which Raimondo invented in 1739. Its shades divinely ranged from sea green to emerald and the color of green grass. Thus, he surpassed Count Rutowski from Dresden, who created something similar 4 years later, but much simpler. Raimondo also produced various types of hard minerals, such as ruby, green jasper, different kinds of agate, and lapis lazuli. He took pleasure in forging gemstones of all kinds. These stones were indistinguishable from real ones. Even expert examination could not prove they were artificial. There is also mention that the prince enhanced the color of naturally dull stones, saturating them with bright shades. In 1767, the Sangro demonstrated the removal of the true color of lapis lazuli, turning it simply white. He also achieved coloring glass, giving it various colors. The French scientist de Lalande, who saw the results of these experiments, wrote in his diary, "The art of colored glass seemed to have been lost in time, but Prince Sansevero revived it. He made glass of various colors which were clear and transparent, as if the glass had originally been melted with them." De Lalande considered the experiments with glass simply marvelous. De Lalande referred to the lost art as the advanced development of a previous civilization lost after a global cataclysm. In November 1753, Prince Sansevero made an amazing discovery, the eternal lamp. While conducting experiments, he accidentally discovered a substance that, when ignited, burned for over 3 months without losing any weight. Sangro described the composition as follows. The combustible material was partly made from a substance obtained from a human skull and partly from a substance he used but did not know how to name. He emphasized that the material he discovered was not phosphorus, but emitted a beautiful and lively flame, slightly less intense than that produced by wax candles or oil lamps. From D. Sangro's letters to his friend, in which he described in detail that a small flame emanated from the derived chemical substance, Raimondo himself suggested that the endless burning was caused by volcanic substances present in Vesuvius's atmosphere, which fuels this burning. He intended to install this light in the underground chamber of the San Severo Chapel, where Christ was to be moved. Most likely it wasn't the ash from Vesuvius in the air that sustained the long-burning but atmospheric electricity, or perhaps some other phenomenon of that time. It's strange that at that time they considered the body of Christ to be present, for example, like Lenin's body is now. Raimondo also designed hydraulic devices, one of which, using only 2 mechanisms, could raise water to any required height without the use of animal labor. This device earned applause and praise from the most experienced experts in this field. Raimondo was also a master of mechanics. In a brief 18th century note about what can be seen in the house of Prince Sansevero, it says, "Not far from the bridge between the Di Sangro house and the mausoleum, there was a clockwork mechanism which, controlled by a musician, played any melody one could wish for on the bells. That is, the music was played on the bells located inside a round temple with 8 columns, and it could be heard from several miles away." Prince Sansevero's competitors were then the only ones of their kind in Italy. Sangro described the second clock, which not only showed days, months, weeks, hours and minutes, but also the moon's phases. At noon, allegorical figures would appear from 4 openings, and moving in a dance-like rhythm, with musical instruments in their mouths, they would perform a march. Instead of a pendulum, there was a dragon's head whose claws struck the hours and quarters by hitting the bells. Subtitles created by Dima. But the polygenesis experiments, this resurrection from ashes, were the most mysterious of all the experiments of Prince Sansevero. According to descriptions by his contemporaries, he was capable of resurrecting plants, insects and small animals from their ashes. Raimondo did not make the technologies available and kept them secret. His student describes one of the experiments, specifically the polygenesis of various crayfish, which were burned to ashes and produced a large number of insects that, when fed with fresh ox blood, were restored in a specific way to a new birth. For our era, this thing is absolutely unbelievable. Astronomer D. Lalande, who visited the prince, writes in his memoirs about the natural polygenesis of plants and animals, especially the ash of fennel, which is a type of dill that was successfully turned back into a plant. If we rule out the possibility of magic being used, then Raymond had a technology for recreating living beings and plants using a set of energy matrices and suitable microelements for this purpose. As we remember, for the natives, any superior technology would be considered magic. Then it's clear why the inventor was not allowed to demonstrate his toolkit. Also, in the field of arts, Raymond invented the so-called coloris or loridrice, a beautiful color that gives a miniature the hue of oil paint. This technique could be used on any material, unlike regular miniatures on ivory, parchment, paper, or other perishable materials. The prince could color marble in such a way that the colors penetrated deep into the material, rather than remaining on the surface. This technology allowed paint molecules to deeply diffuse into seemingly impermeable materials. Today, we might assume the use of ultrasound or microwaves, but how Raimondo actually achieved this effect is unknown to us now. Raimondo produced artificial marble and displayed it in his palace. There were also 2 paintings made from wool of various colors which created special optical effects and were so stunning that they could compete with any painting. He also invented paper for artillery cartridges that did not catch fire but instantly turned into charcoal. Raimondo di Sangro invented wood and charcoal that did not produce ash or residue when burned. I would really like to see and study this process, to understand what kind of substance it is and the technology behind its production. Raimondo also obtained artificial blood by processing food and excrement. See, and here we are still extracting it from people when we could be producing it by the megaton and for free. Of all things, with the amount of excrement our civilization produces, we could drown the world in blood, in a good way, of course. The prince also turned seawater into fresh water without using any corrosive substances or hellstone. Hellstone is silver nitrate, also known as lapis. But here too it's unclear what chemical process Raimondo used, since dozens of different substances can produce a sweet taste. And here is the shocking creation of the alchemist Raimondo de Sangro, 2 figures, a man and a woman. Around the bones of their skeletons, the human cardiovascular system is entwined, made out of metal. Everyone who has seen this amazing installation up close is struck by the incredible detail with which all the human veins and arteries are presented, including even the smallest and most insignificant ones. Everything is assembled based on real analytics. Perhaps Raymond managed to turn human blood into metal or introduce it into the circulatory system by chemically fusing it, and then the soft tissues decayed. In general, the method is unknown. Whether it was the work of a good old 3D printer from the previous civilization, or the painstaking work of a metal sculptor who still would have needed to dismember 100 corpses for reference. Here's another experiment. It's a reproduction of the miracle of San Gennaro. This is a phenomenon where, in a church, the dried blood of a saint in sealed ampules becomes liquid again and sometimes even boils. Thus, Raimondo de Sangro's reputation in the church was completely undermined, since he cast doubt on the miracle of the liquefaction of the blood of the patron saint of Naples. His contemporary, the French astronomer and mathematician Joseph Jérôme Lefrançois de Lalande, explained that Raimondo had constructed a monstrance or display case similar to the one in San Gennaro. It had 2 ampoules of the same shape, filled with an amalgam of gold and mercury mixed with cinnabar, matching the color of coagulated blood. To make this amalgam liquid, there is a reservoir with liquid mercury along the edge, equipped with a valve. When the case is shaken at the right moment, the amalgam becomes liquid and imitates the liquefaction. That is exactly the same effect. Most likely, the church regularly performs such tricks, since it constantly needs to demonstrate miracles to confirm religious faith. But an 18th century source reports one of his incredible inventions. He found a new way to print any images simultaneously with a single printing press, human figures, flowers, and everything else in different colors. Now this is called a color printer. Raymond printed both his own works and those of others, some of which he translated himself, and since some of them were censored by church authorities, he printed them anonymously. Even now, this printer needs both a computer and a scanner, so back then there must have been analogues of these devices, which of course are never mentioned. The medieval inventor also conducted various experiments in chemistry, mechanics, and other fields. He created porcelain of the highest quality using a different technology, which, as is known, was requested by Ferdinando IV from Vincenzo di Sangro, the son of Raimondo, shortly after his father's death. It is a known fact that as early as 1748, Raimondo produced two different types of completely waterproof fabric, which we now call raincoat fabric. The prince gave King Carlo a riding frock coat sewn from one of these fabrics, and the king used it during the winter hunting season. Winter is the rainy season. The following year, Raimondo created the most exquisite painted silk fabric, which the French called piquin. It is a striped silk fabric. He also built an automatic dining hall that served visitors all kinds of food without the need for waiters. Whether the food was prepared automatically or it was just an automatic system for distributing already prepared dishes, we do not know today. Yet, one immediately pictures a spaceship dining hall from the future. Subtitles created by. It is worth mentioning the first book written by Raimondo in 1747, the simplest and most useful practice of military exercises for infantry, printed by the printer Giovanni de Simone and dedicated to King Charles. The work was a huge success and strengthened the fame of Raimondo de Sangro throughout Europe. Special praise came from Frederick II of Prussia, whose military organization the prince aspired to emulate. Another work is a dissertation about an ancient lamp found in Munich in 1753. Along with his apologetics, this is the most mysterious and fascinating of Prince Sansevero's works. The occasion was the discovery in Monaco, supposedly of a miraculous lamp, which was still burning when it was found by those who discovered it during restoration work on the church's foundation. Of course, those who found it did not understand how it worked, but Raimondo figured it out and described it in his dissertation. He dedicated the last years of his life to decorating the San Severo chapel with marble works by the greatest artists of that time, including Antonio Corrodini, Francesco Chiarolo, and Giuseppe San Martino. That's how masterpieces like Modesty, Christ Under the Shroud, and Disillusionment came to be. The material execution of these masterpieces officially remains a mystery to this day. Two of them appear to be covered with a transparent marble veil, which, however, is homogeneous with the statue beneath it, while the third statue is covered with a marble net that seems to have been added later, but is also completely homogeneous with the statue. Today, researchers are confident that all of this is artificial marble, made according to the same principles as any other precious stones created by Raimondo. Essentially, the statues were literally sculpted. Technologies for creating artificial stones were used until the 20th century, then removed from history and officially recognized. From ancient times until the 20th century, the only way to make stone products was by hand carving them with metal tools. What is known is contradicted by many facts and publications from various eras on stonemaking technology. In the royal palace in Caserta, a small table is displayed in the reception hall, which was given to the king by Prince Sansevero. It was made from a piece of wood covered with marble using an alchemical formula. It is claimed that the prince, frightened by the speed of the marbleization process, later destroyed it. The cross-section of the wood is clearly visible. The item is considered unique. But there are many facts in the world that both plants and living organisms are subject to petrification. You just need to know the technology. Raimondo demonstrated this. Prince Raimondo, Prince of Sansevero, was an educated, inventive, and so active a person that it raises the suspicion that this might be the result of the work of an entire guild industry that was processing the technologies of a lost civilization. And as usual later, all this is attributed to a single author. And so it is in every city, in every state, in every historical period. This is also indicated by the fact that we see the result of unverifiable technologies that were never published and eventually removed from public access. Similar activities were later carried out by Nikola Tesla and a whole group of scientists who acted much more modestly in demonstrating some of the technologies they had developed. Although their work seemed incredible, it had already been explained scientifically and, even if incomprehensible, was protected by patents. As Platon Lukashevich testified, in the 18th century European languages and the diversity of new cultures were still in the development stage. Names were also being newly created or reinterpreted. For example, a patronymic was expressed as son of so-and-so. In Sanskrit or in English, son sounds like son. You'd get Johnson, Richardson, Grayson. Johnson means son of John and John is Ivan. Also, endings were added to names and surnames, like, for example, in the former Baltic republics or in Poland, letters were rearranged. Also, names followed all original language rules, but in a new way. And exactly according to the Bukvica, the name Raimondo de Sangro, Prince of San Severo, had a deep meaning. Raimondo means paradise, the place where our world and the divine are united. Mon means first and unity. N stands for ours, D for goodness or heritage, O for divine image. The name means uniting humanity with the divine is our heritage. Dai means double, San means holy, G means speak, R means say, and O means divine image. The meaning of the Sangro is to convey and communicate to people the holy divine images on two levels of understanding. Well, or with a double meaning, that is, one understanding for some people and another for others. Prince Sansevero is the heir of the Holy North. Here it refers to Hyperborea or Daria. That's where these abilities and access to supposedly lost technologies come from. The North is Severa, literally meaning faith. Vera literally means to know Ra, that is, to know the laws of nature and be able to use them. That's what Raimondo demonstrated. Here's another interesting conclusion. In order to be able to understand, let alone use the technologies of a perished, highly developed civilization, you need a person with absolute memory, multidimensional thinking, and probably magical, or as we say, extrasensory abilities. Because only such a person would be able to revive or at least simply start up a device from a techno-magical civilization. That's why we have Vajras, arches, portals, and many other things scattered everywhere, but no one matches the level of development needed to activate these devices. But people like Raimondo de Sangro, possibly Nikola Tesla, and in our time Anatoly Akimov, who invented many technological devices based on the theory of torsion fields, actually had such abilities.